There's a question that keeps showing up in behavioral economics research, and it's not the one you'd expect. It's not, how much do you save, or what's your net worth? It's how do you feel when you walk past something you want and don't buy it? Your answer to that question predicts your financial future, more accurately than your income, your education, or your credit score. A 2019 study from the University of Michigan tracked over 4,000 participants across a decade and found that emotional response to unspent money was the single strongest behavioral predictor of net worth growth. Not investment returns, not salary increases. How you feel when you keep money instead of spending it. And most people have never once thought about their answer. What I want to talk about is something researchers call financial self-perception bias. It's the gap between how good you actually are with money and how good you think you are. And here's what's strange. The gap almost always runs in the same direction. People who are bad with money tend to think they're fine. People who are good with money tend to think they're failing. A survey conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York found that individuals who rated themselves as below average in financial management actually had higher savings rates, lower debt-to-income ratios, and more diversified portfolios than those who rated themselves as above average. The people who thought they were struggling were outperforming the people who thought they were winning. This video explores 15 signs that your financial instincts are sharper than you give yourself credit for. Not all of these will apply to you, but if you're nodding along to more than 7 or 8, you're sitting on a psychological advantage that most people spend their entire lives trying to develop. The first one catches people off guard. You feel a strange resistance when someone offers to pay for you. Not pride exactly, not stubbornness, something closer to discomfort. When a friend grabs the check, or a family member insists on covering your share, something in you tightens. You want to pay them back immediately. You want to settle the balance. Economists at Cambridge University studied reciprocity behavior around money and found that individuals with this pattern of discomfort around receiving financial generosity tend to have significantly lower default rates on loans and stronger long-term savings habits. Their brains have internalized a deep sense of financial equilibrium. Every imbalance, even a generous one, registers as something that needs correcting. That's not awkwardness. That's your brain maintaining a ledger most people don't even know exists. Here's another one. You remember prices, not current prices. Old prices. You remember what gasoline cost 3 years ago. You remember what your grocery bill used to be before inflation hit. You remember the monthly payment on your first apartment. This isn't nostalgia. Research from the University of Warwick found that individuals who maintain detailed price memory across time demonstrate superior inflation awareness and adjust their financial behavior faster than those who don't. Their brains are running a constant background comparison, tracking how value shifts over months and years. While most people absorb price increases passively, your brain flags them. You notice when the same box of cereal costs 40% more. You notice when your subscription quietly increased by $3. That awareness compounds into thousands of dollars of better decisions over a lifetime, and you probably just think of it as being annoyed by prices. You also tend to calculate the per-use cost of everything without trying. A $300 jacket that lasts 5 years isn't $300 in your mind. It's 16 cents per day. A $15 movie ticket for 2 hours of entertainment. $7.50 an hour. A gym membership you use 3 times a week. Costs $4 a visit, but if you only go once a month, it costs $50 per visit, and that math keeps you going. Research published in the Journal of Behavioral Decision Making found that people who spontaneously calculate cost per use metrics spend 23% less annually than those who evaluate purchases by sticker price alone. Your brain has built an efficiency filter that most people have to be explicitly taught. You've been running it automatically, probably since you were a teenager, probably without realizing it was unusual. Another sign lives in your relationship with sales. Most people see a 50% off tag and feel excitement, an opportunity, a win. You see it and feel suspicious. Your first thought isn't, I'm saving money. Your first thought is, why is this discounted? Or, do I actually need this? Or would I buy this at full price? A fascinating study from the Wharton School found that individuals who are skeptical of discounts rather than attracted by them spend significantly less on unplanned purchases over their lifetime. The sale triggers a critical evaluation rather than an emotional response. Your brain treats a discount not as a reason to buy, but as a reason to question. That skepticism probably costs you some genuine deals occasionally, but it saves you from hundreds of purchases you would have regretted. This next one is subtle. You have a physical space in your home. That's relatively unchanged. Same furniture you've had for years, same kitchen setup, same bedroom arrangement. Not because you can't, Effort to update it, but because nothing is broken, the current setup works. Replacing functional things with slightly better functional things doesn't register as worthwhile in your brain. Behavioral researchers at Duke University found that people with low replacement frequency for functional household items accumulate wealth at nearly twice the rate of demographically similar peers who regularly update their living spaces. Your tolerance for good enough is quietly one of your most powerful financial traits. Most people's homes are museums of unnecessary upgrades. Yours is a monument to the radical idea that things that work don't need to be replaced. You probably also have a complicated relationship with gifts. Specifically, you find it genuinely difficult to spend money on yourself as a treat, but have no problem being generous with others. Buying someone else an expensive birthday present feels fine. Buying yourself the same item feels indulgent. Psychologists at the University of Toronto found that this asymmetric spending pattern correlates strongly with high savings rates and low consumer debt. The internal permission structure is different for self-directed spending versus other-directed spending. Your generosity toward others isn't in conflict with your frugality toward yourself. They're expressions of the same underlying value system. Money spent on relationships feels like investment. Money spent on yourself feels like consumption. And your brain has decided that investment is more rewarding. Here's one people rarely talk about. You have walking away power, and you use it. You're in a negotiation, a car dealership, a salary discussion, a contractor quote, and something doesn't feel right. The price is too high or the terms aren't fair. And you can walk away, not as a tactic, not as a bluff. You can genuinely leave and feel fine about it. Research from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management found that the willingness to walk away from a financial transaction is the single most powerful negotiating position a person can hold. And it's not about courage. It's about your relationship with the thing you're buying. People who struggle to walk away have already mentally purchased the item. They've imagined owning it. The loss of walking away feels like losing something they already have. But your brain hasn't made that commitment yet. The thing isn't yours until the transaction is complete. That emotional boundary protects you from overpaying in ways that save thousands of dollars across a lifetime of major purchases. Another sign appears in how you handle windfalls. A tax refund, a bonus, an unexpected inheritance. Most people experience what economists call the windfall effect. Money that arrives unexpectedly gets mentally categorized as free money and spent faster and more frivolously than earned income. But when unexpected money lands in your account, your first instinct isn't to spend it. Your first instinct is to allocate it. Some toward debt, some toward savings, maybe a small portion toward something enjoyable, but even that feels deliberate. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that individuals who treat windfall income identically to earned income accumulate substantially more wealth over their lifetimes. Your brain doesn't have a separate category for free money. All money is just money. And that refusal to create mental accounting loopholes quietly protects you from one of the most common wealth-destroying behaviors in consumer psychology. You might also notice something about how you respond to financial news. Market drops, economic warnings, inflation reports. Most people either panic or tune out entirely. You do something in between. You notice it, you process it. You adjust slightly if needed, and you move on. You don't sell everything when the market dips. You don't ignore a recession warning. You absorb the information without letting it hijack your behavior. Researchers at Yale found that this moderate emotional response to financial news correlates with significantly better long-term investment returns than either extreme reactivity or complete disengagement. Your nervous system has found the narrow band between anxiety and apathy, where good financial decisions actually live. There's also this. You carry cash sometimes, or you've set deliberate spending limits on categories, or you use separate accounts for different purposes. You've created structure around your money. That adds friction to spending. Not because you read a book about it, because it felt necessary. You noticed that certain spending contexts were harder to control, so you built walls around them. Behavioral economists call this commitment architecture, and a 2021 meta-analysis from the University of Pennsylvania found that individuals who independently develop commitment devices for their spending show financial outcomes comparable to those who work with professional financial advisors. You became your own financial architect without anyone telling you to. Here's one that might sting a little. You've lost sleep over a financial decision that most people wouldn't think twice about. A $200 purchase kept you up at night. A subscription you forgot to cancel bothered you for days. An overdraft fee from 7 years ago still irritates you when you think about it. This isn't neurotic. Well, maybe it is slightly neurotic. But research from the University of British Columbia found that individuals with high financial rumination, the tendency to mentally revisit and process financial decisions, make fewer repeated mistakes, and show stronger learning curves in financial behavior over time. Your brain refuses to let financial errors fade into the background. It forces you to process them, to extract the lesson, to build the antibody. That lost sleep is the price of a learning mechanism that most people don't have. Another telling sign is how you feel about financial advice. From people who earn less than you or manage money differently than you do. Instead of dismissing it, you listen. You might not follow it, but you consider it. You understand that financial wisdom isn't correlated with financial outcomes because luck and circumstance play enormous roles. A longitudinal study from Oxford found that individuals who remain open to diverse financial perspectives, regardless of the source's apparent success, make more adaptive financial decisions during economic disruptions. Your intellectual humility around money is actually a strategic advantage. Rigid financial ideology breaks during black swan events. Flexible thinking bends. You also tend to delay purchases not because you can't decide, but because you've learned that wanting something today and wanting it next week are different things. You've developed a waiting period, maybe consciously, maybe not. You put things in online shopping carts and close the tab. You bookmark items and check back in a month. And half the time, when you return, you can't remember why you wanted it. Research from Carnegie Mellon found that a 72-hour delay between the desire to purchase and the actual transaction eliminates roughly 40% of discretionary spending. Your waiting habit is doing the work of willpower without requiring any. There's also this pattern that people who are good with money rarely recognize in themselves. You plan backward from goals, rather than forward from income. Instead of asking, "What can I afford?" you ask, "What do I need to have saved by when, and what does that require monthly?" The starting point is the destination, not the current position. Financial planners call this reverse budgeting, and a study from the Financial Planning Association found that individuals who naturally employ this framework reach their financial targets at rates 3 to 4 times higher than forward budgeters with identical incomes. Your brain has been solving the equation from the right side. That's not common. Most people budget from what comes in. You budget from where you need to arrive. And the last sign is perhaps the most important one, and it connects everything else. You understand, maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep in your decision-making, that money is a tool and not a score. You don't compare your savings to your neighbor's car. You don't measure your worth by your income. You don't feel richer when you buy something expensive or poorer when your account dips temporarily. Money moves through your life in service of something: security, freedom, options, time. And that something is what you're actually tracking, not the dollars themselves. Research from the London School of Economics found that individuals who view money instrumentally, rather than as an end in itself, report higher financial satisfaction at every income level and make more consistent long-term decisions. Your relationship with money isn't emotional in the way most people's is. It's functional. And that functionality is what makes everything else work. So here's the thing about all of this. These 15 patterns aren't a checklist for becoming good with money. You can't just decide to start remembering old prices or feeling suspicious about sales. These are descriptions of how certain brains have organized themselves around financial decisions, often without the person choosing it or even noticing it. Some of these patterns developed in childhood, watching a parent stretch a paycheck or witnessing what happens when money runs out. Some are temperamental, just the way your nervous system processes risk and reward. Some emerged from specific experiences, a financial mistake that burned deeply enough to rewire your behavior permanently, and they come with costs that are worth naming honestly. The person who can't enjoy spending even when they can afford to is paying a psychological tax. The person who loses sleep over a $200 purchase is trading peace of mind for financial optimization. The person who walks away from every deal that isn't perfect might miss experiences that would have been worth the premium. The person running disaster scenarios at 2 a.m. is buying preparedness at the cost of presence. There is no version of exceptional money management that doesn't involve trade-offs. The internet presents financial discipline as purely virtuous, as something that only produces good outcomes. But the reality is that every dollar you save instead of spend is an experience you didn't have, a comfort you didn't enjoy, a generosity you didn't extend. The question isn't whether saving is better than spending. The question is whether your particular balance between the two is serving the life you actually want to live. If you saw yourself in most of these signs, you have a genuine structural advantage. Your psychology is oriented toward wealth accumulation in ways that most financial education tries and fails to teach. But make sure you're building wealth for a reason, and not just because your brain can't stop optimizing. The point of financial security is to eventually feel secure. If you've achieved the security but can't access the feeling, the system has a bug worth fixing. And if these signs feel foreign, if your brain works differently, that's not a deficiency. It might mean your natural strengths lie in areas that don't show up in a bank statement. Connection, spontaneity, generosity, presence. These have value too, even if no one makes videos ranking them. But whatever your starting point, the most useful thing you can do is understand your own patterns, not judge them. Understand them. Because once you see the machinery, you can work with it instead of against it. You can build systems that compensate for your blind spots and amplify your natural strengths. You can stop trying to become a different kind of person and start designing a financial life that works for the person you already are. I made a full breakdown of how to build those systems practically, not just the theory, but the specific structures that turn any psychological profile into sustainable financial progress. How to create automatic guardrails that don't depend on motivation. How to design spending rules that match your actual values instead of someone else's framework. How to build the architecture of financial success around whatever brain you happen to have. If anything in this video made you curious about the gap between how you think about money and how you could be thinking about it, that's the video to watch next. Because the goal was never to feel good or bad about your habits. The goal was always to see them clearly. And clarity, more than discipline, more than knowledge, more than any single strategy, is what changes financial trajectories permanently.